Okay, that was loud. So let's turn that off. Turn this all down. Let me turn this all down. Hang on. Hello? Is anybody there? Okay, people are here. The way to turn my... There we go. Okay, phone is muted. Here we are. I don't know how loud my microphone is. Probably too quiet. I'll turn this down. Hi, hello. Welcome to the show. This is it. This is the stream. I'm going to be working on... Hang on, let me clean all this up because how many times did I tweet about this? Like 20? Let's clear that up a little bit. No need to say it that many times. Okay. Alright, there we go. Turn the music down or your voice up. Okay, I'll turn it down. How's that? Is that better? Hopefully that's all better. Hi everybody. Welcome to the stream. Nothing changed. What? What? Actually, this is bizarre. What's getting... This isn't outputting, is it? This isn't outputting, right? So something's up. Shit. Hang on. This is weird. Hang on. Is this better? It's pretty quiet. Okay. Is that any better? Is this any better, people? Tell me if it's any better. Okay, way better. Alright. Welcome to the stream. We had a pretty crazy month. Didn't change anything. Music too loud. Tell me this, can you hear the music right now? Because if so... Oh! I'm a moron! That's why! Jesus Christ. I thought that was weird that you were hearing it. Okay, there you go. Everything should be just fine now. Everything's good now, right? It's because it was picking up the audio twice. Okay. Well, everything should be okay now. Anyways, also, birthday boy, you should not be here on your birthday. You should be having an eventful day. You should watch Tiny Toons all day. That's the best way to celebrate. But we had quite a month. We have a big checklist of things that we need to get done. Nice thing about Windows 7 is that it has a built-in thing for sticky notes, which is useful because it means I can wake up and I can go, oh, right, work, I forgot, and I can just eyeball what I need to do and slowly chip away at it. But today I'm going to be just working on upscaling a lot of the artwork that we need at a higher resolution, thanks to us redoing the we mentioned it on the Patreon. There's a post for people backing the Patreon talking about it. Maybe I should make a post there right now. It's probably not worth it. I would post to there saying I'm streaming work on the game, but it's like anyone who's following is probably following my Twitter anyways, so whatever. But this game was running at a much lower resolution originally, about this big. This is showing up on stream, yes it is. So this is full scale. Here it is. This is the entire game size. It was right here, this little box. And now we've upped it to this, which is half of 1080. So because someone asked about that too on the Patreon. They said like, oh, does that mean like the game's running at 960 by 540 and your computer has to try to run it at that resolution if you full screen it? No, the game is actually running in a 1080p window now, and it just double scales the image of the game to fit that window, meaning that it's going to look absolutely perfect. It'll be crisp, be pixel perfect, and what it means is if you downscale the window size, because we didn't actually have too many options for that before. We only had different multiples because the game was so small. We're not doing it that way anymore. You can properly choose a resolution, and depending on the resolution you choose, the game will actually scale in a way that makes sense. So anything that's not a multiple of the game's resolution, it'll have aliasing applied to the resized window. So it'll look clean if you have it super high resolution and you're running a monitor that's 1080p. It'll look very clean. It'll look just fine. And if you're using any weird resolutions that's not meant to run at, anything smaller and would give you a chunky looking result, the game automatically will alias the rescale for it, so it'll look fine. So there's that. All this is very minor. None of this really matters. This is the kind of thing where it's like, okay, so your game runs, right? It's the sort of thing that when you're programming a game, you worry about it. No one's gonna really notice or care. That's how you know you did a good job, is that nobody noticed it. You don't want people noticing anything related to this, because then it's like, okay, well, you screwed up. Everybody's noticing something's wrong with the resolution. That's not good. Legit question, is Trick or Treat inspired by Binding of Isaac? No, not in any way at all. And it's a little bit annoying because I know we're going to get that repeatedly every single time someone asks about it, because I guess I see it a little bit, because it's like, oh, you're doing art in kind of this style where it's thick outlines and everything. It's an overhead twin stick game, so it's Isaac. No, it's more like actual twin stick games. Isaac I don't really consider much of a twin stick game. That is the control scheme for it, but you're limited to firing in only 4 directions, and that barely has anything to do with it. In fact, if they took that out and just gave you a fire button that just shot in whatever direction you were moving, if they just made it that, then there probably wouldn't even be a comparison at that point. Like, it doesn't matter. It's more of a Zelda game than anything. But this is more akin to something like Robotron or really Smash TV. It's much more like Smash TV than it would be something like Isaac. The idea is that you're going between different rooms, clearing out waves of enemies. There's lots and lots of different weapons. It's sort of like Smash TV with Metal Slug. I don't like ever having to say that, like, oh, here's comparison to other games, so now we get to look like we're just knocking something off. But it's easier to describe a game that way than making a text post where you can't even really go into it. Pitching a video game is the most difficult thing because everything ends up sounding the same through words. You really just have to show it, which we did show it a little bit in the Patreon video, but I don't think it was enough to make it clear how this thing plays. It's arcade style, like that's the idea behind it. It's just a quick arcade shooter. You have lives, you have continues. It's you got branching pathways, so there's replayability through that. If you liked how, I don't, because Smash TV did have it, but it's more akin to something like Metal Slug 3, where every pathway actually is going to be very different when you go down it. So you might not even see certain enemy types in your playthrough if you go one way, and then you'll have these completely different rooms if you go the other way. So it's going to be different every time you play it. Like there's actual variety and things to see depending on which way you go through the game. It's not like Smash TV where it's like, okay, here's different enemy placement, but everything's pretty much the same and looks the same. It's more than that. You also have a dash button in the game, and part of the reason that's there is not just for the sake of avoiding things, but it's also you can interact with a lot of objects through it. So there's background elements in stages like explosive barrels and everything that if you dash into them, you'll actually kick it forward. So you can kick things like that into enemies and then set them off. So you can get creative. But I know it's probably not very interesting to most people because it's just like, oh, it's just a shooter. It is. I'm sorry. It's just an arcade shooter. We're hoping to at least make it entertaining for what it is. We're trying to have a lot there. We want it to be really fast paced. We want there to be a lot going on visually to make weapons feel, because I mean that's part of what's fun about something like Metal Slug is all the weapons are a lot of fun just because they all have over the top special effects for them and everything. They all feel really satisfying, and that's something that we're aiming for with all the weapons, is that they all function differently, but all of them are satisfying in their own way, and all of them can be useful in some way. We don't really have useless weapons.
Did you put the beef in?
It's over there.
Okay, well, did you put it away then?
No. I thought we were gonna have it.
Yeah, I told you to start cooking it if you wanted it.
Say hi to Julian, everybody.
Where is it? Oh, it's right there.
Do the characters have witty quips for every action? No. That would be really annoying. There's voice acting, which, don't worry, we have a volume slider to turn it off. So if you don't like it, you can get rid of it.
What's this shit?
Julian, this is
garbage.
This is the original one, and I'm trying to clean it up at a bigger size.
It doesn't look bad.
I'm trying to maintain any like weird stuff that you had going on too. Like right here, it's kind of going inward.
Yeah.
So I tried to keep that too over here. So I'm trying to make it look as close as I can.
Well, don't kill yourself over it because it's so simple.
It's almost done. I just have to clean these up after I clean a couple more of these up. And then, I forget what else there is. The logo was really easy to do.
Yeah, the logo, we have a high-res version of it.
Yeah, that was what I did. I did that, and then I compared it because we had like little curly things coming off of it only in the game.
You don't have to worry.
I already did it.
Did you do it? Okay.
It's all
I
done.
only did those because
done.
it looked funky.
It's all finished already. I'm just doing this one, and then I'm scared about the secret shop. Because that background...
That one's going to take a lot of work.
That one's really detailed.
Like I said, I'll see how much needs to be expanded. I might just draw outwards from it. I might not even need to upscale it.
If you do upscale it, there's some things I could show you that you could do with it to make it easier.
Yeah.
Because you dithered it. But
yeah, exactly.
Well, what you can do is that since you can see, like, okay, this was dithered... There's two methods you could go about it. Is either you just fill in the dithering by copying and pasting the solid colors that were dithered and just offsetting it by one, so it fills it in for you, and then you just double scale it and do the dither again on your own. You either do that, or you can just double scale it. You made like a dither pattern as an image, right?
I don't think so.
I have one that I could just give you. If you just take that and kind of wipe over the areas that you know you're going to be applying it to, because you can see it when you double scale it, you can just apply that over there and it'll be fine. Yeah. There's ways that we can make it not as difficult.
We'll see. I still have to take a look at it.
But this one's not going to take that much longer. And then what else is there? There's the fence graphic that I need.
That'll be fairly easy.
Yeah, it should be. Not to mention the lights and the pumpkins were its own layer anyway, so it's not like I have to do that either.
Oh yeah, it's It's about the main menu is about as complicated as this one. It's
Yeah. The little stage select icons are going to be frustrating.
Oh yeah. You know what? I kind of want to redraw them anyway.
Okay.
Especially that, because I didn't like that first one to begin with.
Oh, I don't mean like when you select the stage and it says the name of it. I mean like the
icons.
sorry,
I was talking about the character select.
Oh, you mean the portraits?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have to redo those too. I forgot.
Or we have more of them on screen at once, I guess.
I would say we should probably just redo them.
Okay. We could go back to your old thing of like having them scroll across.
We'll be fine.
Okay.
Because you wanted to redo the pumpkin one.
The pumpkin one, I think, looks ugly.
Yeah, well, I think we have enough time that we could do that.
Yeah, it only took me like a week, right?
Because I was gonna dedicate this whole month to just being
to resizing it.
But after how long the logo took and how long this is taking, I think we could get this all done before even the month finishes.
That would be great.
Because there isn't as much as I remembered. Not to mention the opening.
I really want to get to putting in the levels and everything.
The opening you drew high resolution anyway, so that would be really easy to just take back in and clean up again.
Ooh, you know what? The cutscene though.
What? We never put that in anyways.
Yeah, but I'd still have to redraw it. Unless you want to put it in...
I say if you redraw it, you should redraw it in like Flash or something and use that for reference.
Yeah.
It would take less time. Because I think you're slower with pixel stuff. And I think if you just drew it basic ahead of time, then I could just take it in and clean it up.
How do I do dithering then?
You could just...
Because there's a lot of dithering in those too.
You could just set up shades and like make it a certain color and I could fill it in with a dither or something. It wouldn't be hard. We can figure out something for it. You didn't finish the ending animation anyways, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Mm.
I hadn't finished all the versions of it, but I finished the main like story mode one.
Oh. I say we might end up redrawing those at a higher resolution and taking it in. I mean,
Damn.
It's either that or you upscale it and tediously clean it to be higher resolution.
Do we want to post those original animations on Patreon, or is that?
Yeah, we could. We could.
You don't think that's like too big of a?
No, I think that'd be interesting to see.
Okay.
Seeing the original sized ones versus everything upscaled. I need to add some pixels on here to make it look more rounded.
Okay, well, I better go figure out what I'm going to do today.
Oh, okay.
Did you show the Bippy punch yet?
Oh, I can show that later. Okay, well, Julian's gonna go do work now. But, no, that's not my name on the... Everyone keeps bringing that up. I thought it was really funny, too, was that, people found Julian's really old Tumblr page and were, like, obsessing about it. Like, oh fuck, we got juicy dirt. And it was like, no, not really. I mean, he posted the Patreon to his Tumblr. Like, it's not a big deal. No one cares. It just never came up because it's irrelevant. But, people were then obsessing about that. Like, oh, what else can we find? Is that his name on the donate button? It isn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to everyone who thought you're getting hot juicy stuff there. That's dated information tied to all the best gamer stuff. So sorry. I think the address is really old on it too. It's not a hot lead if you're hoping for it to be one. I think it's weird how often people are like, oh, I respect your privacy, but also take a photo of yourself. I'm like, okay, yeah, You sure do. You sure do respect our privacy. It shows. I don't know why it's so relevant to people. I know everyone says like, oh well, it's because it's mysterious. It's not interesting. Is the thing. If it was just out there, nobody would care. It's absolutely nothing. Part of the reason it's just not out there is because it's easier on our end not to have it out there. With how often we go to certain places, I'm sure people would spot us in a heartbeat. So it's easier not having that all out there. This is kind of hard to clean up because it's also, I'm trying to keep some of the little quirks and awkwardness that came from this one, because it's all wobbly in spots, so I don't want it to be too clean. I may as well just finish cleaning it and then go back to try to make it look more weird. But like I was saying, this is more like Smash TV than it is something like Isaac. Everyone is going to mention Isaac because people, I think, are too young now to even remember Smash TV or remember Robotron or anything like that. I think those were so long ago that no one remembers them. So the new one that everybody jumps to is Isaac, which is still strange to me because Isaac is not really a twin-stick shooter. It's more of a... I don't want to compare it to Zelda either because it's not really like Zelda. It obviously, like, yeah, it has a map screen like Zelda, 2 item slots and everything. The way it's laid out, sure, it's like Zelda, but even then, it doesn't play like Zelda. But I would say it's closer to Zelda than it is a twin-stick shooter. But that's the comparison point everyone always thinks of Isaac when it comes to that, because that's how you happen to attack things in it. Because that's what it was like way back with Smash TV, was that everybody would be like, oh yeah, like Smash TV. And it's because Smash TV was the last thing to come out that controlled that way. People didn't think of Robotron at that point, because they had Smash TV on Super Nintendo, so it's like, oh, like Smash TV. People wouldn't bring up Robotron, they bring up Smash TV. And now that's happening with Isaac. It's, okay, this is the recent example, so it's like that. People aren't aware of those games existing. Which is too bad, because Smash TV is a lot of fun. I'll say this: the Super Nintendo port is actually a lot of fun. They did a pretty solid job with it, and I'd say if you're gonna play it, play that, because the arcade version, even though it looks nicer and runs better and everything, has more going on. It was designed just to be bullshit. Like that was its whole purpose, was to rob people of money. Julian and I were playing through it again, just to kind of remember things about it and take it all in again. The very end of Smash TV I hate, because there's one room in the last level that goes for, I swear to God, it felt like 10, 14 minutes it went for. It was just endlessly piling enemies in, endlessly piling enemies. I thought I said endless twice. Sorry, after we just saw a video, I didn't want to sound like a moron, because we watched the Lasagna Cat. We finally finished Lasagna Cat. We were watching all of it before, obviously, because we were following it since the beginning. But the 4-hour, almost 5-hour video they did for Lasagna Cat, we actually wanted to sit through the whole thing. So we were doing that in bursts if we ever had free time. If you've never watched Lasagna Cat, I'd say go watch the 1-hour one they put up a while back, because I think that's maybe the best one they've ever done now. But that one's crazy how much effort had to have gone into it. But it's almost 5 hours long, and at the very end there's like this little bit that we got to see, and after that, because even though the 1-hour video that they did for Lasagna Cat kind of spelled out very clearly like, hey, this is all a joke. And there's all these things everywhere making it clear like, hey, this is a joke, everybody. This is just a joke. Someone, of course, had to make a theory video on Lasagna Cat and what it all means. And, would you believe it? What it all means is that it's just a joke. Like, that's the video. And I don't typically... I don't know. It was bizarre watching it because it's like, wow, here's people who don't understand humor. Like they're doing this video and they very clearly don't understand why this is a joke, and they're digging into it, acting like this is all a mystery when it's so straightforward. And yeesh. That what was it? They ended up saying like, oh, it's a response to how Pause Inc. is it regards itself as if they are the second coming of Christ, because on their own website they type out that Jim Davis is some kind of mastermind, and it's like, yeah, no kidding. When it's your own website trying to promote a product or a brand, you're going to brown nose yourself. Like, that's the whole idea. That's the whole point to a website like that. So it's like if you go and do a business pitch or something. That's the idea. You're supposed to sound confident. You're not supposed to walk in there and say like, oh yeah, shitty comic strips. You're not supposed to do that. It makes sense why it's like that, but that seemed to be lost on them too. But I'm trying to remember now why I brought this. Oh, it was because at one point they said the true purpose to Lasagna Cat is that it's an endless loop. It's an endless cycle. And what they refer to it as? A never-ending, endless loop, I think is what they said. And boy, the redundancy on that. It's hard to try to come off like you're sounding intellectual when you structure a sentence like that. So, for a second there, I thought I just caught myself doing something similar, which I hope not. I hope my brain's not draining away. I was so mad that the Breakfast at Garfield video got taken. I was wondering why they did. I thought it was because of the song, because I've seen copyright strikes happen a lot due to that song. Pause Inc. took it down, because at the end of the video they had a thing saying to call, not call, but send an email to Pause Inc. saying that you wanted to have breakfast with Garfield. So Pause Inc. went out of their way to... They sent emails out to anyone who contacted them too, saying like, oh yeah, it's a part of an elaborate joke, everybody. No, sorry if you've been misled. This has nothing to do with Garfield. They actually have a whole thing typed out, because several people I know sent emails to them, and all the responses they got were exactly the same. So they have a thing typed out now. Pause Inc. is prepared if you email them with that. So I'm pretty sure Jim Davis is not thrilled with Lasagna Cat. Also, sitting through the whole phone call video, I don't know if I would say it was worth it, but there were definitely very entertaining points that we wouldn't have gone to experience if we didn't sit through the whole thing. There's a guy around the end of the video who he calls 3 different times, and most people are trying really hard to be goofy in some way, but he comes across as completely legitimate. He starts talking about how he was doing internet roleplay sessions online. He doesn't know if he should count that towards sexual partners. And he goes on like a long-winded story for 5-10 minutes, just talking about different roleplay sessions he had over MSN and chat rooms and everything. And it's something. It was very entertaining. And then Max Landis calls at one point, and you can tell it's him because his voice is all shaky and he's giggling at himself. Voices like that are strange to me, where it just sounds like the person's gonna fall apart at any moment. Because Max Landis has a really shaky voice, like he's always fucking terrified of everything. Rebecca Sugar, it's also because whenever I see her in like person doing interviews, she looks very frail and is shaking around a lot and looks like she's gonna collapse while speaking, and it makes me feel nervous hearing it. I get uncomfortable around people who are older, and I can tell it's like physically draining them to even speak. I always feel bad about that. I never want to engage in conversations just because I don't want to take it out of them to do that. I mean, my voice starts hurting after speaking for like a solid hour. So when you're at that age and you're at that point, that must be terrible. I know my grandmama has Botox injections in her throat because she can barely speak. Probably, yeah, this one's not looking so good. I'm gonna need to compare more with that one. But, what else? Oh, I kind of wanted to bring that up because I thought it was an interesting conversation point. It was in the Gex video, and we didn't really get to go into it too much because it had to be cut down since we're making direct references to certain people. But the subject came up about critics and critique and everything, and leave it to the comment section to become absolutely livid over the conversation piece, exaggerating it because you only got to hear a little bit of it. The conversation in specific, because it had to get trimmed down, was because we were talking about web critics online who label themselves as critics, like that guy with the glasses, websites like that, where everybody there is a critic. And the specific example was Lightbringer. Go on DeviantArt and go ahead and look that one up. But Lightbringer is a very, very terrible comic created by what's his name? Whatever. Point is, reviews comics, made a really bad comic. Like it's objectively, I guess I shouldn't say that because that's being hyperbolic, but almost everybody could probably look at it for even a moment and just take it in and go, yes, this is bad, because it's poorly drawn. It's the most typical kind of story you would expect from a comic. It's just kind of nothing. And the reason the whole conversation came up, because it's like, okay, it's kind of weird trying to take critique from people like that over certain subject material because they're so incompetent when it comes to it that it's sort of coming from nowhere. And that's why that one came up, because this is someone who has no understanding of how to draw anything. Anatomy, all of that, completely lost on them. Yet they do a review series on this kind of thing, and they're very bitter in tone. They're very loud. They're very angry, trying to assert themselves that this is fact. And they don't know how to draw, yet they try to critique the artwork in comics specifically for things like that. Like, oh, the anatomy's all off. It's like, is it? Do you actually know if it is? Or are you just kind of saying that? It's harder to take things like that from certain places, which is why the conversation came up to begin with. It's not the idea that if you've never worked on something, then you don't have a right to say anything, which is what people were spinning it into. No, that's not what the conversation was about. It's when people who are completely dumb in this kind of area, they know nothing about it, pretend that they know things about it, and try to offer critique from that standpoint when they have no information about it. I feel like that's much harder to take in and to because I can't even say like, oh, take it with a grain of salt. Take it with, God, like a whole glass full of salt. That's really hard for me to swallow when it's on something like that. And I see that a lot too. I see people all the time try to talk about. I see it with game design. I see people try to act like they're peeking in and understand the whole process behind it and everything. And it's like, oh, well, they could have done this and this, but it's like, no, it's not as easy as that. It comes up a lot with Kickstarters, for example, and I can recognize why it's happened with some Kickstarters for games and everything, where it's like, oh, they were given $4 million. Why did it end up so bad? More money means more betterer. No. First of all, it depends on who's working on it to begin with. Just giving money to somebody doesn't magically make things better. For example, Mighty Number 9, they outsourced to a shitty little mobile game company to develop it. Already a bad idea out the door. But then also, you have to take in things like rewards. I think rewards are the biggest part of a Kickstarter that really leads to their downfall. Is when you're promising way too much in terms of rewards, because it's like, oh, well, it's gonna be the hot new thing. We got T-shirts, we got action figures, we got all of this that we're gonna give people, and they're gonna love it. It's gonna be the new thing. Great, you're spending a lot of your time and budget managing that sort of thing, when you could be focusing on the game, but instead you're focusing on all that. And partially they have to, because I know plenty of people who only back certain Kickstarters because of the rewards. But at the same time, that's where a lot of that money ends up going. More than you would imagine ends up going towards it. People never plan for that accordingly. And so people always saying like, well, where'd all the money go? In some instances, it makes complete sense, and it's still their fault because they managed themselves so poorly. But I understand where the money ended up going. Like, it makes sense to me. It was a stupid mistake on their part, but it's not as simple as, well, they got money, so it should work. People also grossly underestimate how much money you need for some of these things and how to budget themselves and everything. There's plenty of things that go into that, and I'll always hear people acting like they're insiders, they understand all of this, when it's like, no, there's much more to it than just that. I know it seems very simple to break apart and understand, but there are so many variables, so many things that could affect it. It's not as simple and clean cut as that. I was about to say simple and clean, wasn't I? Good thing I caught myself on that one. But a gaming audience seems to be the nastiest about that kind of thing too, where people try to understand how it all functions and works. I don't know if I should, whatever. I was thinking about skipping the song, but y'all get to hear it. But that's right, everybody. Thievin' Imp in the chat. It's his birthday, so wish him a happy birthday. And hopefully he does a lot today. But it's why with the Patreon that we did, we're not really doing any sort of rewards, because I know a lot of people are probably mad about that. But I said it repeatedly before we even started the Patreon. It was just like, hey, listen, this money's for what we're working on. It's not going to go towards rewards. If that's something you care about, then just, you can steer clear of it. And if you're not interested in the games, by the way, I'm going to say that now, if you're not interested in anything we're working on, don't feel obligated to back it. Like, if you already backed it just because it's like, oh, it's these guys, you really can just back out then. I don't want people seeing it as like, oh, they need a... I like the stuff they do on Oni Plays. It's a Patreon for the games we're working on, and I don't want people feeling like they need to slap money down just because of something like that. If what we're making really doesn't interest you, then don't pay money for it. It's as simple as that. So I as much as I appreciate it, I also understand. I understand in general why people get mad over like crowdfunding and everything too, because it usually is pretty shady, and it usually is coming from positions where it's just people sort of grabbing for money. and I don't want us in a spot like that. So it's why I feel like I need to throw that out there again. If you did back it and you're not interested in what we're working on, don't feel obliged to stay backing. It really is meant to support that we're working on these things. But we gotta... Did I clean most of these up? This is like the opposite of how these streams typically go. Usually I space out having a conversation and get nothing done. I'm getting more done than usual, and I'm not even realizing it now. I think I cleaned all of these already. It doesn't look like any are left. I guess this looks a little rough. I could clean this one more. Just always just draw a new line on top of it. There you go. Now it's more rounded. It's that easy. I think I kept most of the imperfections that the original had. This one's more lumpy, I think. No, I kind of got it. This one's pretty lumpy looking. No, I got that too. No, I think I captured the shapes pretty close. Yeah, these look pretty close. I guess I just need to clean these up. I also know Julian. You did not color limit this. Nice try, Julian. This isn't pixel art, Julian. What are these, Julian? Julian. That's aliasing. Now I can cut them off really easy. I actually didn't even notice that until now. Whenever I was playing it in game, I never ever spotted it. Because at this size, I can't really tell it's there. I guess it makes sense though, it's why it looks so foggy around the edges. This isn't 8 colors. This is probably like 4 colors, I think. But this was the last month that we were sort of juggling between Bippy and Trick or Treat, so from this point on we're focusing pretty much entirely on this game now. We actually got a lot of new animations done for Bippy. It's actually crazy how fast Julian can animate, because yesterday I think he did about 24, 32 frames, I forget how many. He did a lot in just one day. So we, the fact that he's able to do that and everything, it's why we're going to have so much animation in that game. We can really pour it in there. And since it's pixel art, it means we don't have to pair up alpha layers with anything. We just have one dedicated color to transparency, which means that can be done in-game, applying the transparency and everything. We don't need to have an alpha mask for any images. Because when you're doing an alpha mask, you're essentially storing 2 images in the texture information. Because it's not just one image, you also have a grayscale image that's being applied to that image for transparency. So that's 2 images, and it takes up a lot more space by doing that. So half the images thanks to that. Also color limiting, meaning much smaller images because we're using such limited color palettes. So there's a lot of reasons why we're opting for high-resolution pixel art. It's not just because it's like, oh, well, we want it to look crisp. It's also because it's much easier to program and do a lot of animation when you're managing it that well. Because, believe it or not, 2D games are not at a point that you think they are. You would think on a console, a 2D game, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted, but no, hardware can still be pretty lousy about 2D games, which is really frustrating and annoying. Mostly on console, like, that's the problem. PC, you're not going to have as many issues, because you're free to do whatever you kind of want. It's on a PC. There aren't specific hardware limitations. Things are being stored on your actual hard drive, when on a console, you can't really do that. You can't just make information like that. You have to hold it within the game data. it's a lot messier than it should be, and because of all of that, I always bring it up. A good example is Skullgirls had this problem. They had to actually shrink the size of one of the characters because all the texture information that they were feeding into the memory was too much for it. It would dip the frame rate, and then on top of that, it just couldn't hold all of that in its information. It couldn't preload all of it and keep it saved in there. So they had to downscale the character. And I think they just permanently kept him downscaled too. They didn't like scale up the artwork in game. They just made that a permanent change because of console limitations, which is it's shitty that had to happen, but it's also at the same time consoles are shitty for HD 2D games like that because textures are textures. It's still information that you need to load in there and everything. It's not as clear cut and simple as it seems like it would be. It's a much trickier process. It's why most of the time it's not just because of laziness that you'll see it where they'll do characters that are broken into pieces and like scaled and rotated for animation. It's not the only reason you see that so much in games. You see that because it is easy, like it is much easier than doing hand-drawn animation, but you also see that a lot because it means, hey, we have everything broken into pieces that's less intensive than having 200 frames of animation that we need preloaded at all times. 200, by the way, is not even a good number. That's a horrible figure I just came up with. I'd say 600, 800, 1,000 maybe. If you're actually going to be doing it to a character that is playable, you probably have around 1,000 frames if it's detailed. I think Bippy we're already nearing, like, trying to think about it now. Probably hit like 300, 400 frames for it already. We barely have anything in there. Okay, I'm gonna need to curve this a little bit more. Doesn't look so good. Doesn't look so good at all. Another nice shortcut that I could be taking is I could just take this directly in the Paint because Paint has the curved line tool that I could just use instead of using these. So I'll probably save that for later. But if a game does have frame-by-frame animation, a lot of the time they have to heavily compress it. So the most unfortunate way that can end up happening is that they have it all there. They have all the frames in like a sprite sheet and everything, but they heavily downscale the character size, and then in-game they upscale it. So you end up with really, really blurry characters because of it, and it's an unfortunate sacrifice that needs to be made sometimes. It's the harsh reality of doing a 2D game if you're gonna have hand-drawn animation. You would hope that things are better than that at this point, but they're not. It's very hard to be efficient at doing that right now with how console hardware is. Although you should look back and see how some consoles were about it, because it just wasn't even worth doing 2D games on some consoles. The N64 is a great example of that. The way that you had to restrict texture sizes, color limitations, and everything, the N64 was a nightmare to set things up on. Not to mention that the whole thing with the hardware is that if images got upscaled, it would try to alias them and everything, and they get really blurry. Like that was supposed to be a major draw of the console. Was supposed to be that. Because it's like, oh look, our games look more seamless than the PlayStation, where they're chunky and everything wobbles around because their Z buffer's messed up. It doesn't look as great now. Sure, at the time it was a nice thing, but it sure doesn't look very good now. Although people realize too that in a lot of games it's hard coded in. It's a thing that they turned on their own. So if you use a Game Shark and you know what line is enabling that, you can actually disable it, so you get a silky smooth games. And then people complain because, oh, there's dithering. I don't like that. I kind of like how the dithering looks in a old 3D like that. And it's being done because applying that makes it less noticeable. Because, for example, if you're going to have a gradient on screen of white to black, there's 255 colors that you can do for that. Think of that then at a high resolution. Think of a gradient like that being applied to a super high resolution. So it's being stretched out to 1080, but there's only 255 colors. You're going to it's going to be super, super noticeable seeing the transition between each shade because there's only so few of them being stretched out at such a large scale like that. So it's why people will do different methods for drawing, shading, and everything like that, because you don't want that to be noticeable. You don't want that to be so visible to players. I remember being bugged by that when I was playing Halo 3 on an HD TV, because you could see, since it was a gradient that was on the edges of the screen and it was only between like 32 different shades, you could see it very clearly. You could see each shade very clearly, and it was obnoxious seeing that because it sticks out to you. It's like, oh, that doesn't look so good. But if you dither it, you can give the illusion that there's more shades being mixed into that. Or, because yes, they dithered for PS1 and N64, they dithered different shades. The best thing you can do is to, because this is an option that you can do, for example, in Photoshop. If you're doing Save for Web in Photoshop, which, by the way, wonderful to use if you want to color limit. It saves a lot of trouble. But you can choose two different methods for that. You can choose either not even having any kind of like dithering. You can choose for that. You can choose to have dithering, and it can be a pattern, so it's what you're familiar with. You get the, for example, here you do like this. So that would be like pattern-based dithering, is just different variables of that grid and at different intensities. But you can also get what is it called? Diffusion. If you select that, it'll just randomly scatter pixels around. It's not random, but it's scattered around in a way that would make the most sense. And it looks very unusual when it's done in a low resolution, blown up. But if it's something super high resolution, you do that is the perfect way of doing it, because since it's such a wide variable for how it creates that pattern effect, you end up not even noticing like the transition between different shades if you apply that to 3D. It's the absolute best way of handling it, and it's a good way of masking the fact that there's only so many colors that you can display. What do you think of the mess the new Mass Effect turned out to be? I think it's weird that everyone's harping on it so much, considering the fact that BioWare has always done a terrible job with game animations. I don't know what suddenly got people noticing it now, and only now. It's been a problem since always with them. Not only that, but Mass Effect 3 was kind of a mess too. Like, this is not a series that's been flawless perfection at any point. So it's weird to me that people are only noticing it now when it's always been sort of a thing. By the way, the song has an Easter egg thrown into it with that one lyric, because it spells out Sonic Team. Because it doesn't really make sense, and they keep saying it, but it's because the first letter of every word in the lyric spells out Sonic Team. I only found that out a few years back. They use this theme a lot. Phantasy Star Online had it playing at certain points. I think it's in Project X Zone. Don't quote me on that. I never played Project X Zone, but I think it found its way in there. They use this song a lot. They did a really good job with that. You know, we have Burning Rangers at the office. Maybe we should play it at some point. Could be fun. This is probably one of the best themes I can think of for a game of that time period. They did a really solid job with it. It's in Samba de Is it in the new Samba de Amigo? Because I never got to play that. I heard it was botched because our good friends at Gearbox got their filthy hands all over it. I wouldn't be surprised if it found its way in there though. Sega loves this song. And I don't blame them. It's pretty good. All this for a futuristic firefighting game, which is, you know, it was a fun concept. Fun concept. Really good music. Too bad in game you don't really hear any of this. It's just completely silent. That bummed me out. I remember being thrilled hearing this on the title screen. It's not this one. It's the other one, which is really good too. But in game, it's just pretty much quiet. It's not. It's an alright game. I wouldn't say it's great. It probably does not hold up at all now, but it's still fun for what it is. It was a very ambitious game, considering the limitations of the Saturn hardware that they wanted to do that. And they had some trickery to make it work. It's too bad. It's too bad they put so much work into things like that, and ultimately none of it pays off, because it's like, okay, yeah, great. You're making this look subpar. I can just play a game on the PS1 and it's gonna look better anyways. That sort of effort just goes wasted because of that. Being really stupid with this one. I think I'm gonna be really dumb handling these, because these are very messy how Julian drew them. Part of why they're messy is because we actually were gonna make this game in like only a month originally. We were going to just plop it right out, and I didn't feel good about it. Julian will still get very upset with me about that to this day, but I didn't feel good about that. I did not want this to be a slap job. I wanted it to be a game that would be okay. Because I never feel good working on a project that I don't actually like. I never feel good about it. I can try to convince myself to be okay with it for a while, but it always gets to me eventually. And it was because we had a publisher originally that it was going to be going under, which thank God it didn't, because they were horrible. They were very, very lousy. I am glad I did not have to put up with them. Shenmue was originally gonna. It sure was. Shenmue was going to be on the Sega Saturn, and the tech demo for it. It's impressive. It's very, very impressive for a Sega Saturn game, but at the same time, compared to what other consoles were doing, it's not that great, and it's disappointing that. I mean, that was the whole point. The Sega Saturn wasn't meant to be a 3D console originally. It was going to be a 2D console. And then they slapped in hardware for 3D last second. That's why in a lot of 3D games, environments are being rendered typically in 2D and just being manipulated to look as if they're 3D, because the hardware could not handle it. It really could not do 3D. It would slow down to a crawl in most situations, unless they barely drew anything on screen. It was so dumb how they did it too. It was so dumb how they did it. They were rendering everything in quads, which is a lot more intensive. They just slapped it in there because everyone else was having their new big 3D console. It's like, well, how the hell is Sega supposed to compete if they're not going to even be up to date? What's the point if they're not going to have a 3D console? So, that was what they ended up doing. There's still really great games, too, on the Saturn. I love the Saturn. It's just a shame it didn't really get to... A big part of that's also because of how Sega was kind of handling it over here. It was a disaster over here. I think I've talked about this repeatedly during streams. It's because I really do like the Saturn, and it's a shame to me how much it failed over here, especially. Because it wasn't a major flop overseas. It did okay. Didn't do great. Still lost them money. But it wasn't the end of the world for them overseas. But over here, it was not worth it at all. That's why they kind of just gave up on it over here. But I remembered even the 3D controller for the Saturn. I remember that feeling really uncomfortable. But when we played Christmas Nights, it surprised me. It actually feels really, really nice. The analog stick on it is, it's easy to tell where you're holding it and everything. It's very smooth. And I guess I forgot that about it. I haven't used one of the 3D controllers since I was younger, because I don't even own one for my... I don't have my Saturn in California. I still need to get things shipped over here. But I didn't have a 3D controller for it. I only had the normal controllers, which, by the way, some of the finest gaming controllers, period. The Sega Saturn controller is wonderful. The D-pad on it feels amazing. 6 face buttons, which are great. Just a really, really nice controller. Whenever people do polls on like, oh, what's the best game controller of all time? If they don't have Sega Saturn controller listed on there, it means they never felt one. They never played with one, because if you ended up using one, you would understand why it feels so good. And another underappreciated controller, Neo Geo CD controller, really, really nice. Has a little clicky joystick on it, which is wonderful to have for fighting games especially. But it also feels good on just arcade games in general. It feels nice having the little clicky joystick. You're hearing the little micro switches popping as you're using it. And the Neo Geo Pocket had the little clicky joystick on it. So it's why fighting games played so well on it, even though it was a little handheld console. I would not say the PS2 blew the Dreamcast out of the water in every single way. The PS2 hardware-wise also wasn't ultra impressive. Consoles that came right after it wiped the floor with it in a lot of regards. And not only that, the PS2 didn't have as many options open to it out the door. Although, people didn't care about that at the time. They didn't care about the fact that, oh, hey, the Dreamcast has a modem built in, you can take it online and everything. It seemed like that should have been a big deal at the time, but it wasn't. Because, I mean, that was the thing with the Saturn. The Saturn had it had its own modem adapter you could purchase to play games through X-Band by dialing another phone line directly, which, by the way, X-Band, I love it to death. I'm saddened a little bit that the Saturn's service through X-Band wasn't the same as like the Super Nintendo and Genesis, but at the same time, I'm grateful because it means at least it still works. You cannot use the X-Band on Super Nintendo or Genesis because it connects to a server, That server doesn't exist anymore, so you're not connecting to anything. You're not able to use it. There's no point to it existing anymore. Just too bad. I loved it. The X-Band was a modem for Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, and it was really cool because essentially it was Xbox Live before Xbox Live. Functioned in a really similar manner in terms of how it worked. You had a gamer tag and everything. You could send messages to other players through. It was using email, but you were able to send messages to each other. You could also just send email through it if you really felt like it, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but at the time it was cool. You got to have your own avatar to go along with your name and everything, and you could tint it a different color. So it was like you had a gamer picture and everything, like Xbox Live would have. And it was a quirk to how it worked. If you picked up a phone when you were about to go against a player in a game, you could actually talk to them while playing the game because you were directly connected to their phone line. So you could talk while playing a game too. It was a really, really cool idea. It was a lot of fun. And games that were supported through X-Band were because the X-Band had loaded into it patches for specific games. So by popping a cartridge in, it would take in the ROM information, patch the ROM, and then you were playing an online version of it, and it could get information through it. So it had Doom, like it had Doom Deathmatch. They set up their own thing for that to work through X-Band. And I don't know why you'd want to play Doom on a console over the PC at the time online, but it was cool nonetheless. Like it was neat that it had it. Street Fighter 2, Killer Instinct, NBA Jam. It supported Super Mario Kart. It supported a lot of fun games. It was a cool system. When you played against people, it had a matchmaking system. You had a ranking in every single game, so you had a score for it and everything. I wish some kind of emulator did that now, where it had matchmaking services for games like that. But it means it would also, the people who set up the emulator would need to be reading information through the games to be able to calculate, like, okay, who won, who lost, where do we cut the game off. There would be so much work going into that I would not see anyone bother setting that up. On top of the fact, too, that people who do emulators typically hate setting up netcoding of any sort. To the point that people will go back to emulators that had online support just to remove it, which I hate that. I hate anyone who does that. Don't do that. Part of the reason people like getting emulators is because they can play these games online. Don't strip that off as a function just because, like, oh, I made these changes and it's not going to be compatible with a few of the video filtering options I put in. Okay, well, go fix that then. Don't just strip it off. If it's a functionality that's always existed, don't remove it. That's not going to be a thing people are going to be thrilled about. You should try to make it compatible. Don't start stripping features off because you didn't know how to make it compatible. You should be aiming for that. You should be aiming for support for everything that was already there. Because if that's not going to work, then what if you start having incompatibility issues with, like, different controller plugins or graphical plugins, so now those don't work anymore either. You can't just start removing everything from an emulator because you couldn't get something working right with one of the things there. You should be trying to get that functioning alongside everything else. But what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Dreamcast had a modem built in. That was why I brought up X-Band. X-Band was a really cool service. Saturn had a different version of it where rather than you connecting through matchmaking, you would just connect directly to someone else. You'd have your phone line ready, you'd dial their number, and then that'd be it. You'd be directly connected to your friend. So even to this day, it still works. You could set up a modem with your Sega Saturn, still dial up a friend and play them in a game. But console X-Band, like Super Nintendo and Genesis, not going to work anymore. The servers are down. And I think someone who actually worked at Catapult released the source code for the Sega Genesis one. I don't think they released things for hosting your own server for it to connect to, but people figured out there is a debug command so you can get to a hex editor on the console versions of Xband. So in theory, if someone was able to start a whole server and people tediously poked away at that, they could potentially reroute the Xband to go to a new server to dial, but I don't see anyone putting in that kind of effort to get something like that functional again. It was cool at the time. I would love if people figured out something like that, but I don't see it ever really happening. But that was a big thing with the Dreamcast, is that they were really, really trying to take advantage of the fact that, hey, we got internet, guys. We got it. Had a built-in modem, had SegaNet. A lot of games were compatible online. And it was cool. It was really, really cool. I loved that a lot as a kid. Playing Choo Choo Rocket, Bomberman Online, the 2 days I had it working, Phantasy Star Online. It was really cool getting to play games online. But the PS2 had a DVD player. Dreamcast didn't have that. It was the cheapest DVD player at the time, and that was it. That was all it needed. PS2 completely swept the Dreamcast thanks to that. Even though the Dreamcast actually had, because as much as that has come up as like a joke, like, oh, what did the Dreamcast have? I think people think that about me too, based on like videos, like, oh, he doesn't like the Dreamcast. He's admitting it. It's shit. It didn't have games. Are you kidding me? It had plenty of games. It had a ton. I was more than happy with the Dreamcast when it came out. Well, okay, not true. I was stuck with Echo the Dolphin as one of my first games for it, and I was furious about that. Outside of that, I was thrilled with it because there was plenty. If you knew how to burn discs, it meant that you could pop Puzzle Fighter on there. You get all your favorite fighting games. You can have King of Fighters. Thank God 98 was ported to the Dreamcast, although not a very good port, but 2000's on there. So you can have KOF 98, 99, 2000 on your Dreamcast. You can have all the best Capcom fighters, and really it was all the best Capcom fighters. Third Strike. You could, if you're not even, like, if you're the kind of person who actually favored Second Impact to Third Strike, that was on the Dreamcast too. And they're perfect ports. They're wonderful, wonderful ports. Better than the Xbox port, where there's 2 frames of input lag for no reason, making parrying very difficult to do. And then even worse online. It was next to impossible doing parrying online. Not to mention the game's frame rate would drop if you did a super jump, which was very obnoxious. But really solid port of Third Strike. Second Impact, really good port. Capcom vs. SNK 2. You had Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which also very good port of it. Unlike the PS2 and Xbox ports, where the graphics are a lot muddier, runs worse. You have weird issues with frame skipping, so sometimes hits don't even connect because of it. God. Audio sampling issues. There's a lot wrong with the ports of that. Yeah, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure arcade perfect port to the Dreamcast. Although I'll say this, PS1 port of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is pretty impressive for what it is. The fact that it's a CPS3 game running on the PS1 is pretty impressive. Yeah, they had to cut off a lot of frames of animation. The stands, they had to color limit them, and then also some of the sprites for the stands are squashed and then rescaled up in game, so they look really bizarre. I get it, but still, it's impressive, and they have the Super Story mode, which is pretty cool. But the Dreamcast port is absolutely perfect. It's wonderful. Project Justice is pretty fun. If you love Capcom fighters, the Dreamcast is like a must-own. It's what they were using at tournaments for the longest time. They weren't playing the Xbox version of Third Strike. Are you kidding me? They pop in a Dreamcast for it. It was wonderful for that kind of thing. You had a lot of fun games from Sega. You had Jet Set Radio. You had Space Channel 5 Part 2. You had Shenmue was a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are still going to be harsh on it because it's like, well, you don't do anything in it. At the time, are you kidding me? It was great having something like that, and even now, it's still fun to go back to it. It's really bizarre admitting that about it, but you really do feel like this little stupid town full of socially inept weirdos who barely can speak or communicate. You do feel some sort of attachment to it, and the poor translation and voice acting kind of helps boost its likability. It's like a Deadly Premonition situation. Just makes it more likable and charming. Shenmue is a very, very charming game. It's a lot of fun thanks to that. It's very enjoyable, and I could easily go back to it over and over and over again because of that. But you had things like House of the Dead on there. Typing of the Dead is a lot of fun. I actually like Typing of the Dead more than House of the Dead 2 with just a light gun. I think it's more fun. I cleaned this one up the wrong way without even realizing it. So let's fix that up. Skies of Arcadia was a fun game. Power Stone, I forgot about completely. Power Stone, I am so mad that it never got a port beyond the PSP one. With ad hoc. It doesn't have online play, it has ad hoc. And you would hope, okay, PPSSPP, great emulator, almost perfect, and a lot of games work online with it without really many issues. The reason people do that is because Monster Hunter, for whatever reason, people want to play old Monster Hunter through that emulator. Here I am hopeful, thinking like, okay, well, if it supports almost every single PSP game being played online, it's got to support Power Stone. Nope, sorry, that's the one game it doesn't support. Almost every single PSP game is supported online play through that emulator, except for Power Stone. Go figure. I would be in heaven if that game got supported through that emulator, but nope. Sorry. It's a really good game. It's a lot of fun. It's a shame. It's something I liked a lot about Anarchy Reigns, not just because the combat in it is pretty fun within its own right, but it reminded me of Power Stone in a lot of ways too, interacting with the environments and picking up weapons and crazy events happening while fighting. That game is a lot of fun, and it's a shame it didn't really get to work out either. I don't know why Platinum is kind of like I don't want to say they're the butt of gaming, but general audiences typically don't gravitate towards a lot of what they've made, which is a shame. Although then I've heard things like that, like, oh, well, they're falling off because all their games are the same thing. It's just combat and dodging. Yeah, they do a good job with it most of the time. I'm okay with that. Then again, I haven't played Korra. I haven't played the Transformers game they did. I haven't played those, I guess, which is where I'm typically hearing that. But with like Bayonetta and everything, I can't complain about it there. Anarchy Reigns, I can't complain about it there. Those are fun games. And Anarchy Reigns, especially, the whole draw there is that it's a big multiplayer game. So you have like 4 against 4 with combat structured in a similar manner to something like Bayonetta. I cannot complain about that at all. I am completely fine with it. That's more than enough to entertain me. Although I'll also say this. Oh my god. Playing God Hand again. I forgot how much I fucking love that game. It has to be maybe my favorite game of all time. I forgot how much I love it. It is such a good game. And I remember even as a kid, because thank God for the friends I had it recommended to me by a friend. I might have not ended up buying it. If it weren't for the fact that I already had played Beautiful Joe and loved it, So I was familiar with Clover already, and having my friend tell me like, "Hey, have you heard about God Hand? Like it's coming out soon. It's people who did that. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun." And I was like, "Oh, I never heard about this, but I'll be sure to check it out." And I don't regret it. I loved it. But boy, that game sure got shafted, didn't it? And that upsets me because that could have been something monumental. That really could have changed so many things if it got the proper response that it deserved. But it didn't. And even though now people do look back upon it fondly and bring it up and everything, saying like, yeah, here's a wonderful example of how shitty writers for websites can be when reviewing games, not giving them a fair chance and not even understanding them half the time. Okay, great. I'm glad it got to provide that, but I would much rather it got to be successful. Clover didn't go under, and they got to do a game like God Hand again. Like they could have had a proper follow-up. They could have had a sequel. They could have fleshed it out more, added more onto it and everything, but nope. Sorry. Doesn't get to do that. Although even if it reviewed well, I bet people wouldn't have bought it. It's a weird game to exist, because as much as everyone's like big on something like Dark Souls now, which I think part of that's because difficulty in games in general has kind of dropped off anyways. It's why there's a demand for something like Dark Souls, not to mention its world building and everything. It makes sense why there's an appeal for it now. But something like that was not a game that people really were clamoring for at the time. It wasn't a thing that people would have really wanted. It was odd for something like God Hand existing when it did, and it kind of makes sense why it wouldn't have sold. Even if it reviewed well, I could see it not selling. It's just too bad because it's a really good game. It's an amazing game. If you have never played it, please, for the love of God, do yourself a favor and play it. It is the most satisfying combat you're ever going to experience in any video game. I can't stress that enough. God Hand is the most because that's the biggest part too. If you're gonna do satisfying combat in a game, it's not enough that you feel like you're actually fighting and everything, and that because that's part of what works so well about God Hand. You really feel like you're a part of these fights and everything. It's not you just mashing buttons or anything. You're looking for openings. You're looking for opportunities to guard break. You're looking for opportunities to you try to see if enemies are about to let out an attack, so you can just dodge in place and counter attack. You get to set up your own move list and everything, and there's so many possibilities with it to get really creative and chain together moves and everything. There are so many things about it. Holy cow, it's such a good game. I'm glad I went back and played it again, because it's very easy for me to get disappointed with where games are kind of at right now, since not too much comes out typically anymore. You'll get a couple of games over the course of a year that's like, okay, yeah, these were okay, and usually that's it. It's usually just okay. These games were all right. I guess these were fine. It's rare to get something where it's like, oh my god, I wanna play this every single day. I want to get better at this. I want to know everything about this game. It's rare to get that now, because usually nothing offers that kind of experience. Even if it's a game you really enjoy, it usually doesn't offer enough that you could get that invested in it, where it's like, oh, I want to get so good at this game. Usually 2 playthroughs are enough to have everything kind of burned into your memory, and it's like, oh, I have this game memorized now. There's no difficulty. There aren't really any mechanics here. You just kind of need to know where everything's positioned, and now it's really easy, and I can't have that kind of satisfaction from playing it repeatedly. Not to mention unskippable cutscenes and things like that. That always makes it really hard for me to go back to games, is things like that. I blame Half-Life 2 for that really kind of kicking off the idea of like, oh, they're like interactive cutscenes. You can walk around as these people talk, but you can't progress. You have to wait. It's why I have a hard time replaying something like Half-Life 2. I've seen these moments a million times. I understand. Okay. Yes. Even as invested as I may be in this game's plot, as much as I may enjoy it, repeating these scenes over and over again becomes tedious after a while. Not being able to skip them, having to wait there 5 minutes for these conversations to play out, it's draining. It's very, very draining. And because that's how these scenes work, that they're interactive, like, oh, you walk around and wait for them, because they're not actual cutscenes, you can't really skip them in most cases. You do have to wait them out, and that's never enjoyable. That really hurts repeated playthroughs or moments like that. And those caught on. People love putting that in games. And yeah, they extend length. They can obviously expand on the game's story and everything, because it's like, oh, it's not just you watching a cutscene. You feel like you're a part of it because they're talking and everything. But I feel like there's more seamless ways you go about doing that. I really liked how Deadly Premonition did it, because which, by the way, it's weird to be complimenting a game design decision in Deadly Premonition, because as much as I love its writing and characterization and everything, I wouldn't really go as far as to compliment a lot of what it did as a game. It's still fun. It's still really entertaining. I love it to death. It's one of my favorite games from that generation, but it's for everything but the actual gameplay for the most part, which is rare to see that in a game. I almost could never say that about a game where it's like, oh yeah, the story is what really held it together. That's almost impossible to find in a game. But the characters are so charming and likable, and it's the right kind of weird and strange to me that I adore it. And it is ambitious. Like, it has a big town and everything. Everyone kind of lives their own lives and they drive around and everything. Like, it has a lot of cool ideas, but it's also really flawed. And it's why people also seem to misunderstand what the charm to that game is. I always see people like, oh, it's so bad, it's good. No, it's not it. It actually has likable writing. It has likable characters. It's everyone in the town has some sort of personality behind them. It's not that. That's not the appeal. That's not why a lot of people actually like Deadly Premonition. It's not, haha, it's so bad it's good. It's because what's done well is actually done really, really well. And it's the kind of characterization I would want to see from other games. And I'm sad that it's kind of limited to just that. York is maybe one of the most likable protagonists in any video game. It's that's what because that was the big funny was Jim Sterling. Ha ha ha! This game is it's such a lovable mess. Emphasis on the mess part. I'm being funny by liking this game. No, there is something actually enjoyable about it. It's not just a big goof. But that aside, the reason I bring it up is whenever they had portions in that game where characters are talking and need to be talking for a very lengthy period of time, you're usually in the car, and you usually have to drive a very far distance. They actually broke up conversations too, so if you get out of the car and then get back in, they'll pick up the conversation at a certain point. You don't just lose the whole conversation. It doesn't just awkwardly interrupt it. It'll continue. And I really like that about it, because it's like, okay, I need to do a 10-minute drive because everything is actually spaced out as if this is a town. It's not 10 minutes, but it's usually like a 5-minute drive. So it's like, okay, I got to do a 5-minute drive, but here's a conversation that spans perfectly that amount of time because they know that I'm going to be doing this drive. But it's also broken up, so if I feel like getting out of the car and then getting back in, it still feels like a proper conversation. It's not me cutting it off in a weird way. So they set it up in a great way because of that. This is a thing that you have to do. These are two destinations that you have to drive between and everything. It very much is a thing that they have to have in there anyways, but they can also tell a story while you're doing something like that. And that's great. That's good. That's better than I'm stuck in this room and I have to wait for these people to shut the fuck up so I can walk already. I've played this game before. I understand the plot. but I have no option to skip over anything like this. I just need to take this all in a second time. And I can understand to an extent, like, yes, the story is obviously part of a game in some of these circumstances. Why should you be able to skip them? I'm not someone who completely fights off story in a game. It's just when you're replaying a game and you enjoy the gameplay aspect much more than the story aspect, it gets frustrating. Not having any option to skip any of that, it gets frustrating. And it's caught on. It's very rare to see games let you bypass that most of the time. And it's because also it extends the length of a game. A lot of games, I blame the audience a lot of the time too, because what was the game, The Order 1886 or whatever it was called? I forget what it was called. Everyone was bringing up like, oh, it's really short, and that's the crux of this game. No, the problem with that game was that it was just kind of, that's it. It's a little interactive movie. You're barely doing anything in that game. That was my issue with it. On top of it being a very uninteresting plot to me. I didn't care how short it was. In fact, it was merciful in how short it was. I'm glad that something that was so uninteresting to me ended up as short as it was, so it didn't have to be as painful to kind of sit through. But people were all making comments about that, like, oh, well, a game needs to be so and so in terms of length for me to even consider purchasing it. It needs to be this long. There's a golden standard for how long a game needs to be. No. The quality of that experience, that's what matters. I don't care if a game is an hour long, if it's something I could repeatedly go back to and play and get a fresh experience out of it each time. If the gameplay is fundamentally solid that I would repeatedly want to play it over and over and over again, or it's something challenging enough that's like, okay, yeah, if you know how to play it optimally, you can get through it in like an hour, but if you struggle, it could take you like 6 hours, that sort of thing. I don't care how short the game is, if it's something that's entertaining the whole way through and I could repeatedly come back to it and be entertained by it. That's what matters. If it's something that's entertaining, I don't care if it's short. But in a lot of instances, that's how developers think, is, no, it needs to be long. It needs to justify a purchase. It's got to be like 6 to 8 hours long. But then, okay, most of this game is padding. Most of this game are these moments where I'm stuck in a room waiting for people to talk for 10 to 15 minutes before I can do anything again. And I very much see it as that. I know most people say, no, it's storytelling. In the position of someone who's worked on things like this before, it is what it is. It's not really storytelling in a lot of these situations. When you have two characters just walking, saying like, okay, you're going to need to go over to the switch button to open the door gate so I can progress to next area, and they have a 3-minute conversation about that. That's not just for storytelling purposes, because that's not really storytelling. That's them spelling out the obvious. That's not natural dialogue. That's not proper interaction that is believable in any kind of way. It's not really there for storytelling. It's not also there to just hold the player's hand and tell them very clearly what they need to do. It's also for padding. Having that there for 3 minutes pads the length out. If you keep breaking up your game with moments like that, you can easily extend a game that you only kind of laid out something playable that's like 2 hours of gameplay. You can bump that up to a solid 6 hours by just constantly working in moments like that. Or, for example, Tomb Raider. I know a lot of people like Tomb Raider, but there's a scene in Tomb Raider where you're climbing a ladder for 2.5 minutes. That's it. You're holding up on the analog stick, you're climbing a ladder. If you spin the joystick around or anything, doesn't matter, doesn't influence anything. It's just a very tall ladder. You get little fake outs like, the ladder is like falling at points, or this thing is like bending and kind of breaking. Oh, it's scary. Is she going to fall off? It's a scripted event. No, she's not. It always plays out the same way. You can't do anything to throw yourself off of it. this is forced. This will always play out this way. But there's little fake outs like that because, one, it makes you think that you're doing more than you really are. But then, okay, you've realized it now. Okay, this is a forced moment. What's the point of this moment? Because even those little things thrown in too, they don't really build tension after they've happened. You've been climbing a ladder for 2 minutes now. It's because that's padding. That's why that scene is there. That's why you're climbing a ladder for 2 minutes. It's not because it's meant to be tense, because you can't maintain that. You can't maintain tension climbing a ladder for 2 minutes. It doesn't work. It's been too long for a player to actually feel that at that point. And that's why it's there. You stretch these moments out to just the right amount where someone doesn't pick up on it, so they can fill up time, and that's kind of it. And I get bugged by that very easily when I spot that in a game, because I recognize it as that. I know when it's there for storytelling, and I won't be as bothered in those situations, but when it's padding, you can tell, and I'm not thrilled by it whenever I see it, because I recognize it as that. And a lot of these games have it. It's how you meet that criteria. I mean, it's the idea of that too. People are saying like, oh, games are becoming more cinematic. I don't really necessarily agree with that either, because at least in a movie, when characters need to get from one point, they just cut to the next point. In a game, you have to tediously watch the character walk there for 4 minutes. You're getting to experience all the parts that a movie didn't think was interesting enough to show you. But a game's okay with doing it to you because it can draw the length out. Hi, Julian.
Why are you screaming about video games so loud that I can hear you in the other room?
Because people say I'm too quiet for the microphone.
I'm joking, I don't care.
How are you, Julian?
I'm okay. What are you doing?
I'm tediously cleaning up these cloud thing.
I'm sorry I made them overlap.
That's okay. Although, I spy aliasing.
I didn't do that.
Julian.
You did that.
Julian.
You didn't do...
Julian.
You didn't do...
Julian.
Nearest neighbor.
Julian.
You were supposed to do nearest
Julian.
neighbor.
This is the original scale.
You did by
Julian.
cubic.
This is yours. This is the one you
isn't.
gave me. This is the one you gave me. This is original scale. Julian.
Well, that's bad.
Julian.
I don't know why I did that. Are you sure?
Yes. I never noticed it, though. It only matters now because I'm upscaling it.
I mean, it's still bad. Why don't you just color limit it?
It's not a big deal. I can clean it up anyways.
Wouldn't it be faster, though? That way you don't have to go in and do every single one.
It doesn't matter. It's going to take more time to do that, I think.
I wonder why it happened.
How many colors did you limit it to? It probably...
I didn't limit it, I just picked the colors.
That's probably why.
Are you sure this is the original version?
This one is, and this one has it.
Oh, you're right.
This one's the original. This is the
a fucking
upscaled
bummer.
one. That's not a big deal. I just noticed it.
I mean,
now.
like, well,
the reason I noticed it
because we wouldn't have noticed it, it could have gone in the actual game.
Oh, that's true too. Although that's not even a big deal, but
it's a big deal.
If
we're gonna make a big deal out of the heart in Undertale having weird pixels,
that's frustrating because that's everywhere. That stupid fucking sprite is everywhere. It's 8x8 pixels. How do you screw that up? That's different, Julian. That heart's different, Julian. That matters. Why is the bottom end of it chunky, and then he tried to clean up the top, but then he cleaned it up wrong, so it doesn't even convey
my
it.
guess is that he did it on purpose. He did it as a stylistic decision, like, oh, I want to make the pixels really obvious, but it doesn't make sense because that.
But he cleaned up the top of it.
Yeah.
But he didn't clean it up the right way either. It looks like a butt. He didn't clean it
It's
so
because
it's actually rounded.
He probably thought like, oh, I want to make the pixels on this really obvious because it's a video game. I want to make it really obvious how this is a video game, and I want to make a metatextual observation on how video games.
Then why didn't
work.
he just leave it chunky all over?
But then when he did the big chunky heart, he was like, oh, it doesn't look like a heart enough because it's big blocks.
Where's
on
the
top.
game theory video on this? Maybe the top end is supposed to represent life. That it's organic, it's shaped, but then the bottom half, video game.
I think it's
rough, pixelated.
He
It's a
wanted to
mix of
be-
the two.
He wanted to be
Life
stylistic,
in a video game.
and he didn't want to commit to it. Is what my guess is. I don't know, maybe it really was just a mistake that he never noticed.
I feel like it's a mistake. Any art that he did, it really stands out. That's true. He is a musician. He's a very good musician. But he also had he had an artist involved who was really talented.
I thought he had several.
Did he?
Don't the credits list like 4 people?
I usually just see.
I might be misremembering.
I usually just see Temmie's name. She's insanely talented. Why didn't she do more for it?
Oh my god, you ate half the casserole already?
No, I didn't.
Half of it's gone.
I only had like a square yesterday. Julian, are you exaggerating?
Look, I'll fucking show you. You want to say I'm exaggerating? I'll fucking show you.
Why are you cussing?
Look at this shit.
Where did it all go?
I haven't had a single piece since I made it.
I haven't had any today either, though. I haven't. Julian, I.
It's okay. I know you like big pieces. It's
That
fine.
that is true.
I'm kidding about being mad.
Julian, I'm sorry. I only had one square.
Yeah, like a fucking foot long square.
It's because I'm taking pieces of it like it's lasagna. I always take perfect boxes of lasagna.
What does that mean?
Because people usually make thin cuts of lasagna, I guess. I usually have perfectly big square chunks of it. Let's make lasagna next time.
Sure, I'd be up for that.
Do you like lasagna?
Not particularly, but I could do with a break from casserole.
You don't like lasagna?
It's not my favorite. I'll eat it.
Oh, you should try it from that Italian place. They do really good lasagna.
I'm sure they do. And you know what? The thing about... You left the empty carton in the fridge again.
Of what?
Of soda.
Carton.
The nice thing about lasagna would be that I could make it exactly the way I want it, because usually I don't
Speaking of empty, you left the moldy milk out. And
I thought I threw it out yesterday.
I dumped it.
Oh, well, thank you.
When do you think that chicken's gonna fall down?
Never.
I'm surprised it finally turned black.
It was already black.
It turned black like a month ago. It kept its color for almost a year now. Oh, Julian!
Yeah.
Come here.
You know what will happen is it'll probably fall down when it gets windy again. That's only when Chris says something really funny.
You do the Mario laugh.
I do the Mario. I swing my arms from side to side.
Chris really likes that in German.
Yeah, he does.
That's because German sounds so funny. Say und.
Gracias de Mario.
Have you tried KOF 14? Yeah, I played it with Aaron. I need to play it more. I only got to play for a little bit. I feel kind of weird about it, but it's probably because I just didn't try it enough. I'm happy that... I'm surprised Vanessa's back. I'm surprised they listened to put Vanessa, of all people, back in. Because she hasn't been in a KOF game since 2002? I always liked her a lot. I like a lot of the newcomers that came in KOF 2000. I know people feel weird about KOF 2000 because it's like, oh, strikers. I don't like strikers either, but I do like things about KOF 2000. In fact, I would love it if someone did like a fan hack to take out strikers and just left the game alone otherwise. Because then it could actually be probably pretty decent. But, sad the USA team's not coming back. I remember someone over Twitter got really mad at me because I was pointing out the poll to vote on new KOF 14 characters, and I said, hey, give the USA team a vote, and they're saying that's cheating. You're cheating. It's not cheating. That's not cheating. Would be like making a bunch of accounts on my own to vote or something. Just pointing out the character like that. It's not cheating. There's no rules either. It's just a poll. But the poll was the new face team and the USA team at the top, and that would be absolutely perfect. If they have the new face team back and they had the USA team back, I'd be in heaven. That would be a perfect KOF game. Because they got Yamazaki back. I didn't think they were going to do it. I'm glad they did. He's always been one of my favorites. They I don't know why Whip's back. I could do without Whip, but okay, she's back. Vanessa's really surprising. What else do I like? Does anyone remember Lin from 2000? I actually liked him a lot, but I know they're not going to ever bring him back because I think they don't even know if they have the rights to him at this point. I remember there were interviews from like the team, and they're like, yeah, his design just kind of like slipped in there. No one even knows who really came up with him. He's not very typical of a KOF design. I'm sorry for the dogs next door. I didn't really like Meili. I kind of like the idea of her. I don't really like her design too much, and I hate how her sprites look. You can tell that it was a new team taking over KOF when she was introduced because of how awkwardly she's animated. But okay with Angel. She's really technical. She's tricky to use. I like her a lot. She's fun. Well, like I was saying before with games, because I remember I was on the whole thing about unskippable whatever, making it hard to go back and replay a game. It's very easy for me to kind of feel down about video games at this point because not enough typically comes out each year for me to feel like thrilled. It's like, oh, 3 games came out this year that were just okay. But if you're ever down about things like that, just go back, spend a whole day revisiting as many titles that you remember kind of loving when you were younger that you haven't played in a long time. Because I hadn't played Stretch Panic since I was younger. I hadn't played God Hand since I was younger. I hadn't played Super Monkey Ball since like 2003, and I went back and played it again, and holy shit. It's so simple, but it's so good. They came up with some great level designs for Super Monkey Ball. The camera, I did notice, is pretty wonky with it. It's why everything feels a lot more intense than it should be. The camera takes a very long time to rotate itself to where you're facing, but it wobbles around like everywhere if you're tilting the joystick. It's why it's so hard to keep yourself positioned straight. But I can look past that easily. I don't even care about that too much. It's a lot of fun. It's a really, really fun game. It's really hard when you're playing the more difficult stages. I sucked a fat one going back to it, but I forgot how much I love that game. Because it encourages you too. It wants you to risk your life when they have like the warps that you can hit and everything. They always make them really, really difficult to get to. And they're always really satisfying if you actually get them. I think it's the most tense I've felt playing a game in the longest time. I forgot how good it is. But Super Monkey Ball was a lot of fun to go back and play. Stretch Panic controls better than I remember it controlling. It got shit on really hard in reviews way back when it first came out, which I'd understand just because it's kind of like a tech demo. There's only a handful of boss fights. It's just a boss fight game, really. The levels don't have much in them. I understand shitting on it for that, but people were saying the control scheme in Stretch Panic is horrible. No, it isn't. It feels fine. Takes getting used to for sure, but once you get it down, it feels just fine. That typically goes for treasure games. Mischief Makers seems really unusual when you first play it, but once you get the hang of it, you actually really gel with it. God Hand is perfect example of that. God Hand did something very different, and it doesn't seem like it controls right, but once you get used to it, you love it for how it plays. So just going back and playing so many different games, it made me feel a lot better overall. Just remembering that there's so many good things that have existed. And even if you're not seeing as much of it now, at least you can always go back and play things like that. And since there's so much, too, you're probably going to stumble on more gems the more you just kind of go back digging through things. I'm glad I did that. It was refreshing. And I'll say it again, if you've never played God Hand, please, for the love of God, go and play it. It is the most satisfying game you're ever going to play. And would you believe it? Has a difficulty curve. A really, really intense one, too. So there's always something to strive for in it. And that's my favorite. That's my favorite kind of skill ceiling you could introduce, is one that it gets so incredibly high up there that even the most perfect players can struggle with something. Yeah, I don't know why my laptop fan does that. It always gets really, really intense for no reason. So you can hear it audibly. Even when I cleaned it out, it was still doing it. I don't know why. That's true, the Mystical Ninja games are on the N60. That pissed me the fuck off. I just remember that Screw Attack did a video talking about, what was it? I think like top 20 Super Nintendo games. This is long ago, by the way. But Mystical Ninja came up and they're like, oh yeah, the first Mystical Ninja is great. No, what was it? It was like, maybe it was franchises that need to come back or something. But they're like, oh yeah, the first Super Nintendo game is great. But then they had some Nintendo 64 games. What the fuck are they talking about? Are you kidding me? The first Super Nintendo game's fun and all, but every single follow-up to that game, they just got better and better. Goemon 2 on Super Nintendo is leagues ahead of the first one in almost every single way. It's a great game, really easy to you don't need a translation, you can just pick it up and play it. The third one needs a translation. I think even to this day it doesn't really have one. But the first N64 game is great. It's just a combination of that with the I mean it was Ocarina of Time before Ocarina of Time, just as a little action platformer game. It's a lot of fun. It's really good music. The only bad thing about it is that the camera can be wonky at times, and even then, it's not that bad. Typically, it's fine. You don't have to really fight with it. But then the sequel on the N64 is great. That game's amazing. That's one of the best N64 games, easily. Did they ever reference the fact that the real Goemon was boiled alive? Yes, they do. I think that was the continue screen in a couple of games, is him held over a pot. That was my introduction to a lot of Japanese lore, was through those games. All the different demons that you fight at points as little enemies. I always wondered what those umbrellas were, and now I know. The little umbrellas with the one eyeball and tongue sticking out. Those are the demons that possess household objects. Those are always really fun. Yep, that was the first time I remember seeing one, was Kirby's Dream Land 2. That was one of the mini bosses. And then more and more I kept spotting them in games. I was like, what are these? Why do I keep seeing them? You ever play the original Rayman? Yeah. I grew up with it, and it's really fucking hard from what I remember. I had the hardest time ever finishing that game as a kid. What is MatPat even talking about these days? I remember everyone was trying to turn Hello Neighbor into the hot new thing. Hello Neighbor fucking sucks, by the way. That game is atrocious. It very clearly exists to be Let's Play bait, that you have a face cam on and you scream at it. It's really poorly made. It doesn't function very well. It's buggy as shit. And poorly executed. Asking for a lot too. When it was in early is it still in early access? I'd assume it still is, and I know people make the excuse like, oh well, it's in early access, that's why it's so shitty. They're asking for $30. It's early access and it's $30. I'm sorry, that's shameless. If you're gonna ask for that much money for such a tiny little game that barely works, that's ridiculous. But people were doing theory videos on that like crazy. It was playing off an audience. It's kind of the only reason it exists to begin with. Yeah, there's the Furby one. Everyone stopped talking about that one right away. How about that? It's like these games just kind of come and go because there's not much to them. I haven't heard a single thing about Five Nights at Freddy's anymore. And we used to ironically joke about Five Nights at Freddy's, and it's become so irrelevant that we even forgot about it existing. When was the last time we made a joke about Five Nights at Freddy's? It feels like forever ago. Because it's fallen off. It kind of doesn't exist anymore. I'm fine with that too. I'm fine with that not existing anymore. And anyone who's going to pretend to, like, oh no, the guy's inspirational. You know, there's just one guy and yeah, I'm sorry. He created Five Nights at Freddy's in Fusion, and Fusion is the easiest thing to use to make a game like that. It's why people have tutorials like, oh, how to make a Five Nights at Freddy game. It's so easy to do. It's why he was able to pump them out like every couple of months. It was a cakewalk to make those games. And also seeing the source code, because people decompiled them, he made them more complicated than they needed to be. Those games, if you already had the graphical assets ahead of time and everything, you could pump those games out in probably 2-3 days in Fusion. They take no work to make. Not to mention he had the engine already made when he did like the first 3 games. He already made the first game, so all he had to do was work on top of that to do the second and third games. Those took no effort. So people to pretend those are inspirational, they're really not. Yes, it was one guy, but it's not like a passion project either. He did a game like that already. He did a game that was more of like a passion project, and that got completely swept under the rug. No one cared about it. But when he made Let's Player Bait, that's the one everyone's like, no, that's inspirational. No, it isn't. It just goes to show that you doing what you want to do isn't going to work out typically. But exploiting and manipulating an audience with something easy like that pays off. That works. And it's sad. It's depressing to see that. I need to really clean this one. I feel so inadequate cleaning this live too, because it's like I'll leave mistakes to come back for, and I know people are probably seeing those and I'm like, oh, that's sloppy. It is sloppy. Believe me, I see all of these mistakes even when it's zoomed out. Ooh, and this one I screwed up really bad. It's just that I'll hop around the image to find other things to clean at points. So I'll keep these as like a mental note, like, okay, go back to fix that later. If there's a mistake, I promise you I see it. By the way, here's a good game that Treasure did. It's Guardian Heroes. It's a favorite. I hope we can play it at some point. I don't know how into it Chris would be. It's one of my favorites. I love it. I don't know if Chris would be into it. I know Aaron likes it. The problem is, too, a lot of these games, as much as I may like them, they may not even be fun for a video. Oh yeah, the music isn't playing. Is it not? God damn it, you're right. The music hasn't been playing this whole time. Sorry, everybody. Wow. Oof. I wish I could figure out Saturn emulation. Oh, I can send you stuff. Oh, the reason Jet Set Radio wasn't fun was because... Listen, I am sure that game could have been completely fine to have ended up playing. One, everybody was really tired and out of it when we were playing it. Two, Chris just wasn't into it. One person not being into a game, like just being disinterested, means that they're going to be on their phone and they're not going to be talking. So it's like, okay, yeah, this isn't going to work just because of that. I think it could have worked just fine if everyone was focusing on it more. It just ended up very unfortunate as a recording session. Donkey Kong Country 2, for example, that could have been just fine. Although we lost the save file for that now, so if we're going to go back to that, we're going to have to play through it again. Boy, it's getting hot out. I really dislike how you zoop into the air for 90 million years when you jump. That's part of the point. It's supposed to feel like you're really light in it because that feels good for a game like that. Jumping super high in the air in something like Tony Hawk, for example, feels great. It's part of the design intentionally because you're also platforming around and everything. The issue was that the frame rate was dropping when we were playing it on the 360, so it probably felt like we were hanging in the air longer than we should have been because the frame rate was dropping. Playing it on the Xbox 360 was a complete mistake. That game does not handle well on the 360. Jet Set Radio is impossible to play when you're used to Tony Hawk. That's not true. I'm very well acquainted with the Tony Hawk series, and I can hop between the two easily. Because Jet Set Radio is more of a platformer than it is a game like Tony Hawk. We do want to play Tony Hawk Underground at one point. I think that'd be a lot of fun. We wanted to figure out potentially playing Guitaru Man, but a rhythm game seems next to impossible. As much as everyone keeps insisting upon it, I don't know how we're going to do it. We did play Guitaru Man a while back. Chris and Matt came over and we all played it. And we were all talking just fine playing it. But I feel like it still is going to be kind of difficult to do if we tried to do it as a series. Guitaru Man, by the way, is a really strange one to talk about because the PSP port fixed a lot of the issues. I kind of hate that mentality with games, by the way. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, yeah, that one's a lot easier. You gotta play the hard one. Yeah, it's harder on the PS2 for the wrong reasons. Guitaru Man, I love to death, but comparing the two versions, you can notice all the flaws with the gameplay. When you're playing Guitaru Man on the PS2, it's much harder to see everything coming because you don't really get a clear indication when you're hitting a note. There's a delay period that the game artificially slaps on when you try to repeatedly tap a note. So if you miss a note, you're probably going to miss the next 5 notes in a row because the game has a little timer where you're not allowed to hit a note. It's really obnoxious. Also, pointing the joystick is hard since it snaps onto the path. You don't actually know where you're holding the joystick since it does that. And the game requires you to be precise about it. There's no buffering either. If you're not snapped onto the path, and you tap the button, and then the next frame you snap onto the path, doesn't matter, it doesn't count. You weren't snapped onto it exactly when you needed to be when you press the button, so it's not going to count. It's very, very hard because of that. The PSP one fixed almost all those issues, and it feels much better to play. I would have loved to have seen sequels. I would have loved to have seen more games like that, because it's a really good idea. Guitaru Man is a great idea, that you tilt the joystick to follow a path while hitting notes. That's a great idea. They just needed to polish it up a little bit more. I still love it to death, though. It's a great game. It's a lot of fun. That said, I think I'm going to take a break from streaming for whoa, holy cow, people have been donating, I didn't even know. I think I'm going to take a break because I'm getting kind of lightheaded. I haven't eaten anything. But let me read the donations because I missed all of these. Holy cow. Man. Okay, well, let's see. Thank you, Just Alp, for $10 saying, hey Ding Dong, you got a funky username. Okay, bye. Thank you, Just Alp, for $10. You got a funky name too. Thank you, Sunny, for $5.38, saying, here my boy. Thank you, Sunny Funny. And the whatever. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, the Waldemar, for $40. Holy cow. The Waldemar. No message attached, but $40. Jeepers creepers. Is a Waldemar? Waldemar? The Waldemar? 40. Gosh dang dollars. Okay, well I guess we are gonna go get food then. Thank you. Thank you. Holy cow. And thank you Hroggrim for $10 saying get some lunch on me. Who got lunch on you? Wipe it up. You made a mess. Thank you, Rohog Grim. Arhog Grim. Like Roadhog? Rog Grim. Thank you for $10. Yeah, B-Jam Blues I think might be my favorite song now. It wasn't before, but after hearing it again, I think it's up there. It's a really good one. Julian's is the Sandbone. They're his favorite because they're skeletons. Go figure. That's a good one though. If it weren't for all the annoying voices interrupting it. I noticed that about Gitaru Man. The art style, all the designs and everything. If you had just looked at those and taken those for face value, you probably would have figured that game is a lot more intense than it actually is. The game's writing and its voice acting and everything really takes away from the visual style of it. Because everyone always is drawn with like a really angry face. A lot of characters are all stitched up and everything. It makes you think it's a lot more hardcore than it actually is. Like, oh, everything's really cool looking. Everything's really intense. And it's probably like a hard rock soundtrack or something. No, it isn't. It looks that way, but it isn't. It's bizarre. Because I remember that when I saw the box for it, I thought it was going to be different. Which, that's fine. Although, I'll say this, the voice acting can get pretty annoying at points. Did you listen to the new Gorillaz songs? I sure did. And I like the video. Although, the video's a little bit odd to me. The 3D in it looks less complex than older videos they've done. Maybe that was just for the sake of finishing it. I remember they didn't even finish a lot of the videos for Plastic Beach. Although, someone said in the chat too, the reggae vocals weren't really doing it for me. I kind of feel the same way. I'm not big into that to begin with. Which, I can tie this back to Gitaru Man. Ben K is the most boring stage in that game, and I hate how long it goes on for. Oh, is there a 360-degree version? I didn't see that. That makes a lot of sense then. I didn't know that. Okay, and budget reasons. That makes sense. It's like I said, Plastic Beach, I know they went through hell with that. They didn't get to finish a lot of it. I like how Noodle looks now. It was a fun design for the video, the outfit. I always like that too, is that they always have different outfits for everybody. Because, what's his name? What's his name? Jamie? What's his name? Why am I being a fucking moron? Artist. He, there's always a thing he was going for with his art. The kind of punk aesthetic with it. The tank girl and everything. Jamie Hewlett. Thank you. I'm a moron. I love his art. And that was something he always went for. And I always like the look of it. He always comes up with really good ideas too for that. Listen, I'm hot. I'm sweating, I'm lightheaded, I'm hungry. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll get more of this going later. Also, whoever asked about the curry, I can't believe I forgot his name. How dumb am I? I can remember his first name but not his full name. Oh. Anyways, for people asking about the curry, we always get the chicken katsu from Curry House. I go for deluxe. Julian just goes for standard. Matt had such a good idea last time he went. He got a fried egg on top of his curry. What a good idea. Oof. Looked so good. But I always get the deluxe chicken breast katsu because when you they wrap your rice up in an egg and they give you steamed vegetables mixed in with all of it. it's to die for. It's amazing. It's really, really good. Oh my god, I love Curry House. Oh, if it wasn't so expensive, I would have it every single day. I made a promise to Julian that we're only gonna go once a month right now because I don't want to be spending Patreon money frivolously on something like that. We're saving it for stuff that we need for the game and to afford rent. That's it. We're not gonna go crazy with that money on anything else. It'd be stupid to go up because Curry House is a lot of money. Curry House, since Julian and I live together, we're essentially splitting everything down the middle. For both of us to get curry, it's about $20 for each of us. Then on top of that, it's about $20 to go there and back. So we're spending like $60, $70 going out to Curry House every single time. Not to mention tip. It's actually probably around like 70 to 80. It's really expensive for us to go out there because it's so far off, which is too bad. I wish we lived right by it. Oh my god, I envy anyone who lives near Curry House. They deliver through Grubhub. They are so perfect. Oh my god, I'm so hungry thinking about it. I love them so much. Oh, they're so good. And yeah, their food's really heavy. Just going to Curry House and getting chicken breast katsu and everything, that's enough. You feel full the entire day. It's so filling. They give you soup with it too, and the soup is so good. God, they're good. I love it. Oh. We also tried making curry, which I know it looked disgusting. It's because we used shake and bake for the chicken breast, which was a mistake. But the Curry House sauce that you can actually buy in stores tastes just like it does at the restaurant. We bought spicy oil to go alongside it, so we can spice it up next time that we have it. They are so good. They're just so good. They do great dessert there at Curry House too. They do tofu cheesecake, which is amazing. Green tea ice cream, which is great. Oh, they're so good. I can't recommend them enough. They're so good. But we're gonna go eat now. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you everybody who donated. I might come back on later to keep working on cleaning this up. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll see y'all later. And once I finish this up, I'll post to our Patreon kind of a comparison between the small version of this and the high-res version, so people can see the process going into this of cleaning up visuals to be higher res. Thanks for watching, everybody. And yeah, if you're in California, check out Curry House for sure. Oh god, it's so good. See?